Hey guys, welcome back to Listen Chum for another completely different topic, veganism. Nutrition is an interesting topic with many different diets, but where it gets touchy is when we talk about meat. Vegans and vegetarians believe they should not eat meat for ethical, environmental, and health reasons, and some of them believe that other people should not either. By the way, let's distinguish between vegetarians, who do not eat meat, but do eat animal-made products such as dairy, eggs, honey, and vegans who categorically don't eat anything coming from animals. Some of them are actively pushing for people to stop producing and eating meat or animal products, and they raise important questions. Are humans made to eat meat and be omnivore? What do we actually need to eat? Is a vegan diet better for the environment, in terms of GHGs, water, and other resources? Where does it all stand ethically, killing animals and using them for food? These are all important questions, and I won't pretend I've got all the answers, but let's talk about them. This is an interesting one because we often hear from many sides that early humans years ago were eating a certain type of food, therefore we should eat it too. The fact is, humans evolved, and pretty fast, sometimes in a few thousands of years. Before humans adapted their environment to suit them, they adapted to their environment. And the truth is, we ate what we could find. Early primates, as their cousins the chimps, mainly ate fruits and vegetables with insects. But note that adult male chimps also eat meat on occasion. As early humans moved to the savanna, there was no possibility of remaining mainly vegetarian. The Australopithecus started eating meat around 2.6 million years ago. As they developed tools to cut meat and pound it to tenderize it, it was much easier to eat, more in fact than roots and raw starchy foods. Cooking only arrived about 500,000 of years ago with the Homo erectus. This further helped to tenderize and pre-chew the meat, meaning we didn't need large teeth and jaw. It also meant our digestive system shrank and didn't need as much energy. Combined less energy for digestion, more energy from meat since it's very calorie dense, and smaller jaws. And guess what? Our brains developed. In fact, our brains today consume 20% of body energy, compared to 8 for primates. Also note that pregnancy went from 12 to 9 months. As we went north with the winter, we became hunter-gatherers, and with few vegetables, our bodies needed to accumulate fat. You see hunting paintings in caves, but few painted vegetables. That's why there are also differences in body shapes, diets, and genetics in different parts of the world, as we'll see. The Inuit in North America evolved to mainly eat raw meat and fish. As we invented agriculture, we reintroduced several kinds of vegetables, as well as new types. Agriculture allowed for a predictable and efficient food source. As we domesticated animals about 10,000 years ago, we started drinking animal milk, which allowed for quick and efficient growth, and animals ate what humans couldn't. The paleo diet tries to recreate our pre-agriculture nutrition from 10,000 years ago, but is it adequate for modern humans? That's a good question, especially considering genetic mutations that happened since. But in general, when someone says that early humans were eating this long ago and therefore we should do it too, it's pretty flawed. I mentioned teeth, and let's talk about it because there are misconceptions on both sides. Meat eaters say that our canines, the pointy teeth, are proof of our meat-eating origins. Vegans on the other hand say that our teeth are too square and not made for ripping through meat. Both assertions are wrong. Chimps and gorillas have much bigger canines than us, yet eat much less animal protein. They are bigger in males than females. That's because males use them to impress competitors, possibly fight with them, to mate with the females. Humans meanwhile stopped using teeth for that, we solely use them for eating. Even though we started eating lots of meat during certain periods, our teeth didn't evolve to optimize meat eating. That's due to the use of tools and fire to pre-chew meat. A much better indicator of diet evolution would be the jaw. Chimps had less developed jaws than Australopithecus and Homo erectus. As chimps mainly ate whole fruits, they had enormous temporal muscles to open their mouths so wide. The Australopithecus had a very large jaw while conserving a large temporal muscle, showing it that it incorporated meat in his diet. The Homo erectus had a smaller temporal muscle, so couldn't open his mouth as widely, yet the jaw remained very large, showing a more meat-based approach. The modern man has a less developed jaw, for the same reason as the teeth, because it uses tools. It's also interesting to see how genes vary in the world for certain foods. Here we see our lactose intolerance is more present in certain parts of the world which were not used to milking cows. Much less known is a mutation of the gene FADS2 called, well, I won't pronounce it but you can read it. This mutation favors a more vegetarian diet. It is present among 70% of Indians, but only among 17% of Europeans. Europeans are more used to ingest external fat than Indians, who are better to metabolize fat with a plant-based diet. This is a factor in explaining why a large part of the Indian population is vegetarian, apart from meat availability.
Okay.
And it also helps to explain why Europeans are taller. There was no ideal diet, mainly adaptations to climate and habitat. Note that today to have all necessary nutrients, you need a whole variety of fruits and vegetables, but back then there wasn't that much variety. Now we come to modern diets. One interesting thing about vegetarianism is that studies show that 80 to 84% of people who try it quit, most of them in 1 year. If you follow vegan or vegetarian influencers, many of them decided to quit, all for the same reasons, citing digestion problems, mainly bloating, foggy brains, and lack of energy. Even Jonathan Foer, the well-known vegetarian writer of Eating Animals, said he would eat meat on occasion. Temple Grandin, well-known expert on animal behavior, said she tried the vegetarian diet but was unable to function and needed animal protein. Even Gandhi, who was a proponent of veganism and was known for his athletic build, couldn't entirely abandon milk, for instance. There are 1.5 billion people in the world today eating a plant-based diet. That's less than 1 in 5. Of them, 75 million are vegetarian by choice. That's less than 1% of the world population. Most others would eat meat if they could. Each food contains nutrients, different ones at different levels, but content doesn't necessarily mean what will be absorbed by the body. It depends on how easy they are to absorb in certain foods, it depends on the chemistry of certain components in foods which can either help or hinder nutrient absorption. In general, nutrients in meat are more easily absorbed. Proteins are a good example. They are common in legumes also, but only a fraction will be absorbed compared to proteins in meat. The thing is, even only accounting for protein content, you would need a greater calorie intake from legumes to match the protein content in meat. Let's go deeper into more specific nutrients. I'll go over them quickly, but if you want a more developed video, I invite you to watch the channel What I've Learned. His videos are well substantiated. Vitamin B12 is the best known deficiency in a vegan diet. It is essential for the brain notably, and the deficiency won't necessarily immediately be felt. Vegans will also feel a foggy brain, lack of energy, and studies show the increased proportions of anxiety and depression. 77% of vegetarians and 92% of vegans are B12 deficient. In pregnancy, the body needs 3 times more B12. Otherwise, the baby is more likely to suffer from important neurological problems. Vitamin A, for example, is naturally found in meats such as turkey and pork. Carrots do not have vitamin A. They contain beta-carotene, which is transformed by the body into vitamin A, but not at a 1-to-1 conversion rate, more like a 12-to-1 rate and sometimes even more. Study shows that vegetarian and vegan children often have deficiencies. Vitamin D comes only in meat and some mushrooms. You can also get it by sun exposition, but during winter and indoors you don't get much. Vegans have in average 34% less vitamin D in their body. Vitamin K2, very important for cardiovascular health, is also mostly in animal sources, otherwise in fermented foods. While animal fat contains K2, vegetal fat can impede K2 absorption. For iron, vegetal sources such as spinach may contain good amounts, but components like phytic acid and oxalate impede absorption, which is why vegans are at high risk of iron deficiency. Phytic acid in plant foods limits the absorption of magnesium, calcium, phosphorus, and zinc. What about supplements then? Well, truth is, supplements are not as good as eating food with nutrients in them, because of the chemistry of components I talked about. Choline in egg yolks is much better absorbed than in supplements. Folic acid supplements are not well absorbed. Calcium supplements actually raise the risk of cardiovascular issues. All that because they are isolated. There are groups of people for whom a vegan or vegetarian diet could be harmful, with many studies recommending against it for kids, adolescents, and pregnant women. For pregnant women, I already talked about B12 and brain issues, but there's also a high risk of genital deformation among boys. Otherwise, vegan kids will tend to be smaller and have more fragile bones. Actually, all vegans are more prone to break bones, except in certain parts of the world like West Africa, as I mentioned with gene evolution. And I won't even talk about parents whose babies die as they try to feed them a vegan diet. That's just child abuse. I saw this recently and found it pretty funny during confrontations in France between vegan militants and butchers.
Les CRS au moins, eux ils mangent de la viande, merde. Non mais c'est vrai, regarde, les mecs sont tankés là, il y a 100 kilos, il y a 400 kilos là au moins. C'est vrai. Non mais les gars, vous mangez de la viande quand même. Voilà, merci. Non mais c'est vrai, ils ont pas la tête des végans. Regarde, ils sont tout pâles, tout... Oh merde, fais chier.
Now you'll ask me, what about the negative effects from meat, such as saturated fats? Well, first of all, you can easily avoid saturated fats. I mean, eating meat doesn't equal eating a quadruple cheese at McDonald's. But then there are several recent studies which cast in doubt the link between saturated fats and cardiovascular problems. In 2019 in the British Medical Journal, and a month later, 2 large and rigorous studies were published in the Annals of Internal Medicine and showed that eating red meat had no significant negative health impact. There are other studies you can read, for hormones or otherwise. In the US they are banned for poultry and pork. For beef with hormones will contain 1.9 nanogram of estrogen per pound, while a pound of soy can contain 900,000 nanograms. To another extreme you have pro-meat and saturated fat people. Nina Teicholz is a well-known author on this. She followed a pescatarian diet for years before trying meat and high saturated fat products, after which she started to lose fat. You have proponents of keto diet and raw meat, but like vegans they make the classic, humans were eating this long ago so we should do it too. I don't recommend the keto diet either, as they seem to think carbs are the devil, and they tend to have digestion problems too as they lack fiber. So what I would say, and this is not even talking about vegetarianism or meat eating, nutrition depends on your body and your goals. We saw the differences in genes across the world, but it also depends on what you do and how your body reacts. Strongmen will eat lots of animal protein while tennis players will eat lots of carbs. The documentary The Game Changers tried to say that athletes would perform fine on the vegan diet, but it was debunked by many, and its evidence was more anecdotal. It is possible for some people to perform in some sports on a vegan diet. You look at tennis, Novak Djokovic's diet is plant-based, and Hubert Hurkacz, one of the best world players, is vegan. As I said, everybody is different, but there remain important scientific facts. One thing that comes up pretty often when we talk about animal farming is its environmental impact. It's said that it is an enormous contributor to GHG emissions, that it takes enormous amounts of land, and uses incredible amounts of water and food. About this, Cristiana Figueres, a vegan militant who worked at the UN, suggested that restaurants should do as with smokers and ask them to go outside. Let's look at each case. In 2006, a UN report said that animal farming produced 18% of world GHGs, but the methodology was inadequate and even its author Steinfeld eventually disapproved it, but the slogan persists even today. In reality, studies find that for developed countries, if everyone became vegan it would lower GHG emissions by 4.3%, including 2.6% for the US. This is partly due to the rebound effect, meaning that as people save money on meat, they will buy other products that require GHG emissions. According to Frank Mitloner, an American expert on the livestock industry, the global average is 14.5% of GHG emissions from animal farming, but 80% of that from countries in development. In the US it's 4%, with beef amounting to 2%, compared to 4.7% for the rest of agriculture. And in Japan it's 1%. The difference is mainly due to the lack of production efficiency in underdeveloped countries. If you want a comparison, energy and transport are respectively 31 and 26% of GHG emissions. If you want another comparison, importing fruits and vegetables in the wrong season can result in more GHG emissions than some animal farming such as chicken for an equivalent mass. Animal farming, however, has perhaps the largest human impact on landscapes, with a quarter of all land surface dedicated. During the last 300 years, an area almost as large as North America became dedicated to livestock. Increased efficiency, however, is decreasing this area worldwide since 2000 by 540,000 square miles, equivalent to metropolitan France, all without a vegan revolution. It has been declining in the US since the 1960s. In Brazil and India it followed a similar pattern, partly due from switching from beef to poultry, but mostly with efficiency. The US is much more efficient for meat and dairy production than India, and not even talking about intensive farming. There are 9 million dairy cows in the US versus 300 million in India. But in the US, each cow is 10 times more efficient. Dairy production in the US requires 90% less surface, 65% less water, and produces 63% less GHGs than in 1944. If we want to talk about efficiency, you probably know about food waste, which is a big problem. Well, animal foods only amount for 14% of global food waste, compared to 42% for fruits and vegetables, and the rest being cereals and the like. Let's talk about all the food being given to livestock. All this food that could feed millions and probably end world hunger by the same logic. This and all the dedicated land use which easily could be converted to crops, much more efficient for feeding the world, right? Well, no. The UN FAO says that 70% of worldwide agricultural land can only be used for pasture, so ruminants give those a value. We call this upcycling. They take something inedible for us and create something which we can benefit. They also produce manure. Half of the world's manure is animal-made, and almost all the manure are used for organic agriculture, for food given to livestock. 84% is inedible to humans, such as corn leaves, nutshells, and soybean skins. Some foods are deliberately seeded to feed grain to cattle, but a minority. For example, barley that does not achieve mold grade is recycled into high-quality protein rather than being discarded. The same happens for wheat. So no, it doesn't take 25 kilograms of grain to produce 1 kilogram of beef. A study showed that it was 2.8 kilograms of edible food for 1 kilogram of beef, and for chicken and pork it's 3.2 kilograms. Water consumption. This comes up all the time. While water consumption itself is an interesting concept with many misconceptions, and in fact French author Jean de Cavasdoué wrote a book about this. Water consumption doesn't mean it disappears. It's not like fuel being burned in an engine. For beef, it's often said that 1 kilogram of beef will require 15,000 liters of water. In fact, the vast majority of the consumed water came from the pastures themselves, the grass, and from other eaten foods. Fresh water amounts to 50 liters of blue water, so groundwater in irrigation, per kilogram of beef. The entirety of it returns to the ground or evaporates. If we take water usage for agriculture surface, it's different. In 2011, Canadian numbers by the way, 415,000 gallons of water per acre of land were used for dry peas production. In contrast, for beef production, it was 79,000 gallons per acre of land. In other numbers, it is said that it takes 441 gallons of water for a pound of beef, compared to 713 gallons for a cotton t-shirt, and 39,000 for a car. Certain foods very popular among vegans are real water guzzlers too. A kilo of almonds need 2,000 liters, which is 4 times more than the same mass in oranges, and 10 times more than for tomatoes. Their increase in popularity drove Mexican farmers to illegal deforestation. Nuts, such as cashews and walnuts, are some of the worst plants in terms of water usage, averaging more than 4,000 liters per kilo. Avocado, same thing. Chile is pumping its desert groundwater to produce them. Comparing numbers is good, but one thing we forget is the difference in nutrition value. Rice, for example, needs about 3/4 of the water needed for beef, yet beef is much more nutritive. So in light of all this, giving up meat as a whole won't save the planet or make a major difference. So when the mayor of New York City created Meatless Mondays in school, what do you think is going to do?
Absolutely nothing. Say it again, y'all.
You ain't gonna do shit.
Mankind cannot depend on wild animals for its food supply, as it would destroy ecosystems. I didn't even mention the hundreds of different uses for beef and pork, for instance, in medicine, materials, filters, insulation, plastics, detergents, makeup, and other things. For the ethical side, it's trickier. There's no definitive answer with a clear study. If killing animals which didn't ask for anything is bad, what distinguishes humans from other animals killing each other? The methods? At which point does it become unethical? When humans began using tools and weapons? When they began farming? When farms became mechanized? Where's the limit? Do hunting and fishing fit in the same category? Is it more ethical to never create life instead of creating it and taking it away? Most times there are no answers for this. Answers mostly revert back to animal cruelty. To the argument that animals kill each other, vegans will usually answer several things. Animals do it as a necessity, but not us, since we can live without it, and thus it's only a preference. I already answered that. They again refer to animal farming methods, with cages and such, to say it's not the same. But then again, where do hunting and fishing fit? Others say we can't refer to animal behavior since we distance ourselves from nature, but then it goes a bit against their anti-species tenets. Temple Grandin, the animal behavior expert I mentioned, once saw a calf on a ranch with his flank ripped off by coyotes for some time. The rancher had to shoot it. At this point, it would have been better to die in a slaughterhouse. It becomes subjective, but I'm saying we shouldn't become dogmatic. Humans are the only ones who think about abbreviating an animal's suffering. Then another example. In Nunavik in northern Canada, they have community freezers where they put meat from animals they hunted and fishes they caught. Is this unethical? And by the way, they have no way of growing vegetables outside, it's permafrost, and vegetables either have to come by plane, so think GHG emissions and high costs, or by boat during the part of the year when the ice recedes. As vegetarian author Jonathan Foer wrote, at the end it comes to our intuitions about what it means to reach an ideal we gave a name, being human. Otherwise there are some tendencies we notice. Humans tend to anthropomorphize everything, mostly animals. We tend to give them human attributes, imagine what they feel through our lens, and it's deeply ingrained in our culture. In the West, we have sufficient food security to be picky with our food and reject some for all sorts of considerations, but the 1.5 billion people who mostly eat plant-based in the underdeveloped world would find pretty ethnocentric the idea that everyone should be vegan. Oh, and about animal abuse. Animal rights militants will always show the worst images from the worst slaughterhouses and generalize. Only cases of abuse circulate. It's just like the media showing the most shocking images and giving an unbalanced view. Or a bit like series on serial killers. People watch them, but nobody will watch a series about normal people doing normal stuff. For farms, in the US, family farms amount for 96% of the total and 85% of production, which are numbers in slow decline. 57% of small family farms are specialized in livestock. This goes against the perception of factory farm domination. Talking about those, in 1999, Temple Grandin was hired by McDonald's to examine meat production and produce recommendations. She did, and in improved conditions. She said that farm animals do not want freedom as much as predictability and cleanliness. Animals become nervous mostly with sudden visual and auditive stimuli, as it indicates danger. Solving that alone made a big difference. And even if we perceive this as murder, is it worth doing like French militants and vandalizing small butchers' shops? And notice how they attack small businesses because they don't have the will to go against the big. And most times, the people who are firmly against meat production never set foot on a farm and are often young urban people with anxiety. The fact in nature is, something has to die so others can live, be it animals, plants, or the many animals killed in crop fields by machinery. If you didn't know, I'm a big fishing enthusiast. Fishing also comes under attack for animal welfare, and not necessarily talking about commercial fishing. Recreational fishing is very popular worldwide, be it for eating or catch and release. In 2015, 66% of fishes caught in Canada were released, with similar numbers for the US. Several people, including PETA, criticized catch and release as an unnecessary source of harm and stress on fishes, with the psychological stress killing them. Several things about this. As an Ontarian study showed, 16% of fishes released die, which is much less than claimed by PETA and others, and it lowers further when we account for techniques, handling, and weather. For example, for fly fish trout caught with a good technique, 99% survive. For salmon and lake trout caught in deep waters with a downrigger, it's much closer to the 16% number. And with warm weather, trout die more easily. Something we hear a lot is the pain, and it's an issue we anthropomorphize. Studies show that fishes don't feel pain in the same way we do. They don't have C-fiber nociceptors, which are nerves for high pain, and instead only have A-delta nociceptors, which signal a threat to provoke a quick reaction. The same we have when we touch a hot stove and the hand quickly reacts. In fact, fishes will often bite on the same hook right after release. We evolved for millions of years with our environment and changed diets along the way until we invented agriculture and settled. Even then, diets varied greatly, and it shows on the different genetics around the world today. When we look at nutrition needs, it's clear that a vegetarian diet, and even more so a vegan diet, is missing key nutrients by which it cannot properly compensate for with supplements. This is even more important when we're talking about children and pregnant women. Meat is not as harmful as vegan militants suggest, but it's not to say I favor an all-meat diet or something. You need to have a balanced approach with protein, fats, fiber, vitamins, and dozens of other needed nutrients. Your nutrition needs to be in accordance with your body, your needs, your genetics, and your goals in life. When we examine animal farming's impact on nature with numbers, it is a far cry from the catastrophic claims we often hear about GHG emissions, water consumption, and land and food use. Livestock are an important part of our lives. They provide us not only with meat, dairy, or eggs, but also with manure and other key products. On the ethical side, I see no good reason why we should not kill animals for eating and use their products as much as we could. In fact, I would go further, as I think that we in North America don't eat enough parts of animals. We only eat the meat parts, but there are so many nutritive organs with different nutrients. Some other societies eat them, but us, not so much. It's always important to make sure they are raised in proper environments, which is not always the case. But on the other side, I would say we should not judge farmers by sensationalist stuff we see on social media. Well, I hope you liked the video. I wanted to do this for a while. As usual, I learned a lot while researching for it. The next video will again be different, about the topic I find extremely interesting, the Vietnam War. Until then, stay tuned, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you around.